let me ask you about your beginnings and when you started thinking that documentary film was the path you wanted to take. How did that occur?
Well, it occurred at a very young age. I moved out to San Francisco when I was 19, and I thought I was taking a leave of absence from college on the East Coast. And while out here, I got into filmmaking, starting out as a volunteer production assistant on a documentary, and that set me on a path, and which I've been on ever since. Yeah. And the first film I worked on was a documentary called Word Is Out, which probably most listeners listening to the show have never heard of, but in fact was a very important film for a generation of gay men and lesbians. It was really one of the first documentaries about gay people made by gay filmmakers at a time when there was nothing on television or in the movies and even in the New York Times. So it was a very different period in our history.
Did you attended at AFI? Am I correct?
Well, that was in the 90s. I was in a program called the Directing Internship Program through the American Film Institute, and they every year they would place one fellow on a feature film, and you just got to be on the production from start to finish. It's essentially tagging along with the director. And ironically, the two films I was invited to be on, one was Rambling Rose with Martha Coolidge, and the other was directed by Martha Coolidge, and the other was My Own Private Idaho, directed by Gus Van Sant.
And you chose Rambling Rose, didn't you?
I did. And that's a whole other conversation, which I'm not going to get into on this show.
Okay.
It was a great experience. I will say that. It was a great experience.
Oh, I bet it was.
I just wish I could have done both.
Yeah. What was it about the documentary form that attracted you to it? What's special about the documentary form?
Well, I think what excited me right away was the opportunity to observe other people's lives and get them to tell their own stories in a way that would resonate for other people, and then constructing a story with, working from real material. And then once the film is, that's really process oriented, but then once the film is made and out there, seeing how it can really affect people and really make a difference. It sounds cliche, but it's very true.
No, the documentaries more than anything else have that ability, I think. And we have a lot of amateur filmmakers that listen to the show, and quite a few people that are interested in documentaries. And from what you've learned over the years, what kind of advice would you give those filmmakers? What works for you that you found over the years?
Well, certainly study other filmmakers' work and see what kind of form of documentary interests you, and find your own voice within that. I think that's really what it comes down to as a filmmaker, is just finding your own authentic voice and how you want to express it. And then having a passion for what you want to say. Making a documentary, it usually takes years, so you really have to care about the subject to live with it for that long.
Yeah. Jerry, you were going to ask something?
I want to know, what documentaries were you influenced by? What documentary filmmakers inspired you?
Well, early on, with the Times of Harvey Milk, I saw Barbara Koppel's film, the Harlan County, USA, in the, I guess it was like 76. And that film just blew me away because it's about a coal mining strike.
It's a great film.
In Kentucky, yeah. And I was so taken by how a film, a documentary, could just take you into a whole other experience that you might otherwise not have any introduction to or connection with, and just you feel so emotionally invested in these people and what they're going through and their experience, and something about that film just really clicked for me, and I had that in mind all through the making of the Times of Harvey Milk. If we could tell that story, which at that point people really didn't know anything about outside of San Francisco, in a way that it could connect for people anywhere who might see it and understand why it was, understand the emotional truth of that experience, then we would have succeeded. And I guess that's what I look for in documentaries, is some kind of emotional truth as well as intellectual truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's a commitment of years making these films, and that was certainly the case with the Times of Harvey Milk. I think, if I read correctly, you first got the notion to do this film when Proposition 6 was on the ballot. Is that correct? Or?
Yes, that's right. I started to make a film. I didn't get very far, but I certainly made the declaration that I was doing this film about the Briggs Initiative campaign, which was then the ballot initiative on the California ballot attempting to ban gay teachers. And 3 weeks after that election was when Harvey Milk was killed, which changed the course of history and the direction of my film as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it took 5 years, but ultimately those were 5 well-spent years in that it really allowed time to research and distill and figure out what was the essential part of the story that we wanted to tell.
And what was that for you? What did you find that was?
Well, it was really contextualizing Harvey so that an audience could come to understand why he was a man of his times. And in order for that to make sense, you had to be able to really characterize the times. Yeah. And the decision was to not do a biographical film, which is why the title is The Times of Harvey Milk and not The Life and Times of Harvey Milk. And to have his story told by fewer people rather than a survey of people, so that each person in the film would be a character in their own right, and each, in a way, represents an aspect of Harvey's legacy.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it is a gorgeous film, and I just had an opportunity to see it recently. Excuse me, and I was just absolutely blown away by it. But you do speak to.
Was that the first time you saw it?
First time I've seen it. I'm ashamed
just
to
out
say.
of curiosity. No, I just asked out of curiosity because I always like to know. You know, it's 25 years later. You know, how does the film play for people now who either don't know the story or haven't seen it before? So I'm always interested here.
Sad in one sense because it feels like history repeats itself. So your film has also the Milk, it just has a very very urgency to it.
Yeah, these things are cyclical, but I guess that's how change takes hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you spoke to the people that were quite close to him, and it wasn't too long, I would imagine, after the tragic events around his death. And I'm wondering, that must have been a very kind of raw process, and what that was like for you, and how you approached them to participate in the project.
Well, interestingly, the filmed interviews were filmed in '83, so that was, several years after, and it always impresses me when I still see the film how people have such access to the kind of rawness of their feelings. But that also has to do with the process of filming. I think it adds a kind of intensity to people telling their own stories. But we did pre-interviews with about 75 to 100 people. So these were basically getting oral histories, which helped us to decide who we wanted to film and what parts of the story we felt had to be included.
Yeah.
So there was a long development period from when we started doing the research from when we actually filmed the final people in the film.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I guess, I've said this before, that doing a film, doing The Times of Harvey Milk, there was a certain catharsis in doing that film. I lived in San Francisco during that time. I went through those events. I was profoundly affected by them, and personally, the making of the film was part of that catharsis, I think.
Mm. What for you has been the most satisfying part of this journey with your film, The Times of Harvey Milk?
getting Harvey's story out there. That Harvey, for all these years, Harvey's lived in the movie, and now, he's represented in a whole other way by Milk, and it's going into, venues that we never would have had the opportunity to in the multiplexes and all over. So it keeps reverberating. But
it's certainly going to bring. It would be safe to say it's going to bring more people to your film that were previously unaware of it or too young to view it upon its release.
I hope so. I hope so. People just have a physical sense of Harvey as well as the representative one by Sean Penn.
Yeah, I'm wondering how in your mind do these two projects complement one another?
Well, I think they do. I think there's also a lot of the Times of Harvey Milk in Milk, and I think they complement one another in that Milk, you get a lot more of the personal side of Harvey's story, which we don't tell in the Times of Harvey Milk. Mm-hmm. You get much more of what was going on behind the scenes for him in his personal life. So, in that sense, I think they're complementary. In terms of what you get from the Times of Harvey Milk, aside from the documentary telling of the story and representation of Harvey himself, there's a whole third act to the story that's not in Milk, which is the Dan White trial and the aftermath.
The Twinkie defense,
The Twinkie defense.
Yeah, I know,
yeah.
It's amazing.
And the riots that happened after the verdict, where he was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 5.5 years.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the Gus Van Sant. I saw an interview with him. I believe it was Charlie Rose, and he spoke very highly of the Times of Harvey Milk. And I'm wondering to what extent did you two collaborate in the preparation phase of his film?
Well, I would say that the Times of Harvey Milk was foundational to Milk. I think I'll say that. And Gus is a friend, and I read the screenplay, and I gave some notes to that, and I gave them access to our archive, our documentary archive and archival archive, and research tapes, pre-interviews. So James Franco, I know he was very pleased to get the pre-interview of Scott Smith, because there really wasn't much other material on Scott.
Well, you had the only footage of him that he could study.
Yeah, I did. And I actually had pre-interviews with Cleve and Ann, Ann is in the Times of Harvey Milk and Cronenberg.
Now, did you yourself, for instance, the candlelight vigil that takes place after his death, did you yourself shoot that?
I did, and some of my shots are actually in Milk, some of the original shots that we filmed. But full disclosure, I was at the original march and was right up there. The shots that we filmed that are in the Times of Harvey Milk and in Milk, the shots that they used from our film, were filmed the year anniversary of the candlelight. So that year, a year after Milk and Moscone were killed, there was a 1-year anniversary march, and that's when we did our big shoot with 4 cameras.
Right.
For the march.
Tell me, this is a fun question. Tell me about the Oscar experience. You've won 2 of them. One for Harvey Milk. What was that? What was that like for you?
Well, it was the thrill of a lifetime.
I'm sure.
It's like, I have to say, as a young gay boy growing up, I watched the Oscars every year. Never in my life did I ever imagine that I would be on the other side of it.
Right.
Let alone now I'm on the board of the Academy. So, you never know where life is going to take you when you're a kid watching television, and what fantasies may come true. But it was just such a wonderful, wonderful high. And for that time, 1984, for that film to be embraced by Hollywood, that was a big deal, because there was nothing, Hollywood wasn't making gay movies, gay-themed movies or gay characters, and there was nothing on television. So this was a big step for Hollywood to take, and there was, I would say, just a full sense of celebration around that when the film won, for which I'm forever grateful.
And you actually covered Hollywood's treatment of homosexuality in another one of your films, The Celluloid Closet. And I'm wondering, it's been, I think that came out in 95, 96?
Right, 95.
And since then, obviously, we've seen several gay films, some of which have really caught on with the public in a way. Not only Milk, which it's doing now, but of course Brokeback Mountain prior to that. Do you see a shift change where America out there is embracing these films more and more?
I think so. Certainly Brokeback Mountain was a huge title shift. In terms of Hollywood and the production of these films, it all comes down to economics. So there has to be the box office for those films to continue to get made for anyone to want to finance them. But in terms of audiences, I think audiences are much more mature and sophisticated about the subject, and that's just only going to continue to change and evolve.
And I understand as well that you're working on your first feature film. I think it's called Howell.
That's right.
Tell me about that project. That's exciting.
Yes, it's based on the poem written by Allen Ginsberg in 1955 of the same name, which was a groundbreaking poem in terms of its language and its imagery and its content, and really helped launch the whole beat literary movement. And when the poem came out, it was deemed obscene, and there was an obscenity trial in 1957 against the publisher of the poem. So our film really tells the story of the obscenity trial and the poem using animation, and the narrative thread of the film is the trial itself. And James Franco will be playing young Allen Ginsberg in the movie.
Oh, that's great. That's an exciting project. Are you a couple of months out from starting that?
We hope to be shooting the end of February, begin shooting in late February, early March.
Just have a couple of more quick questions for you, and then we'll let you go. What do you hope that people take from your film and from Mr. Van Sant's film, from Harvey's life, from Harvey's crusade?
A couple of things come to mind immediately. One is the need for everyone, for all of us, and I think this is the universal message, that we all have to be involved in our communities, however we define community, because that's how things happen and that's how change gets made, be it electing a gay politician for the first time, or an African-American president, or ending a war, or fighting a discriminatory constitutional amendment. It's through community engagement that we can really make things happen, and hopefully for the greater good. And I think for gay people, it's to just be honest, to be honest about who we are. And it's a lot harder, I think, for people to be discriminatory against those that they know and love. And that's what Harvey's message was about then, at that point in history, in 1978. And I think that still holds true.
Oh, we still need that message now.
Yeah, we do.
Do you see an heir to Harvey out there, whether it's on the political horizon or somewhere else?
Well, I think there are multiple heirs. I think that in communities all over the country there are people doing work on a local level and state level. I don't think there's anyone that looks like they're going to be a breakout star in the way that Harvey might have been, in the way that Obama is, and I think we always hope and look for that. But by the same token, you never know where it's going to come from. Who knew where Barack Obama was going to come from 3 years ago?
That's absolutely right.
They're out there.